If not, motion to approve then. We'll go with Director Greenaway and moved and seconded by Director Parker. All in favor? Carried. Minutes. You have the Connectivity Committee meeting minutes from November 9th, 2023. Have you had a chance to peruse them? Are there any errors or additions that you see?
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
Okay. When we had the delegation come in, when we had the delegation. When we had the delegation come in, I think it was last year in 2023, they said that, and I can only talk for Fort St. James because I don't know if they did this to the rest of the communities, but they said that they would come in to the district Fort St. James and electoral areas C director and the community once the project had been publicly announced. Well, the project's been publicly announced, and to this date, neither the district of Fort St. James or I have heard anything from them. So, yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up. So maybe we should have them back in again and put them on a hot seat, or be nice to them. Does that sound better, Curtis? Or C.A. Halkinson?
Yep. Who else had their hand up then? Davis. Oh, yep, Manager Davis, go ahead, sorry. Yeah. Oh, okay. No, I think it's been definitely bona fide. I think that there's some matters coming up that we're going to want to bring them in for a discussion anyway, so I think it's good. I mean, I did have an opportunity to discuss some of the projects with other individual board members and with City West, and I have called them a couple of times, but I think it's definitely worth bringing them back, so yeah. So, any other comments or questions? All in favor of approving the minutes or receiving them? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, administration correspondence is the next item. You see before you the letter that we proposed to the CRTC with regards to the province's application. At this point, just a motion to receive would be in order, and then we'll discuss it. Moved by Director Stoltenberg, seconded by Director Newell. Okay, let's discuss the motion. And I've looked at this letter a couple times after I put it together, and I could make a few changes, but at this point it's just tweaking it, but I'll throw it open if anybody wants to add anything or change it at all. Or... This was a topic, by the way, at the, it was brought up a couple of times at the Canadian Rural and Remote Broadband Conference. It's definitely out there. I don't know how many of you had a chance to read the discussions of the people that have commented on the application, but there's quite a few, and the province does feel at this point they have a significant support across Canada for it. Director Parker?
Did we find out, because I had heard too that it had to be, every province had to be on board with it. Did we find out if that's the case? It is?
Yeah, I actually had discussed it with Rachel Greenspan when we were down there, and it's not necessary to be all across Canada, but they do largely feel they have the support of most of the provinces at this point. Any other comments, questions, suggestions? Director Greenaway.
I just wanted to let you know that NCLGA wrote a letter of support as well, and I think the administration's seen it and they've sent it on.
Good. Yep. Last call. Okay, all in favor of the motion to receive? That's carried. So we don't have a supplementary agenda. Anything at this point under new business? I will bring up, just briefly discuss the Canada Remote Broadband Conference that I attended earlier this week. And full report will actually, or more comprehensive report will continue. On Friday, I was asked to sit on a panel discussion with Rachel Greenspan and 3 other folks. And with Chair Parker's permission, I did it. I was concerned, though, I didn't have a lot of time to actually prepare. So when I introduced myself, I said I was Chair Parker. That's and so any blowback, you know who to blame. It was a good discussion. It was actually, the topic was amplifying connectivity benefits through relationships, creativity, and growth. And the one question I had some problems with was lessons learned. And so I hummed and hawed and thought about it and changed my mind and then finally did agree. And that when they asked me what lessons learned about relationships and that, I said, don't assume just because you want to improve connectivity in your region that the major telcos actually want to have a relationship with you. And it definitely sparked discussion. There was a number of references to it throughout the rest of the conference. But a lot of people came up and said, yeah, don't worry. At this point, that's pretty common belief. I talked to my counterpart down in, or one of the counterparts from the Columbia Basin down there, and they said, yeah, it's the same issue. I think one of the things that I had, there was one of the fellows who was sitting next to me on the panel was a person who builds networks, and he said, well, we want to have a relationship with you, and I thought that was great. It did spark a lot of discussion with other telcos that were there. TELUS was not there, which I thought was significant. But I had Rogers coming up to talk to me and a couple of other smaller providers at the time. And I think that there's going to be some good discussions that come out of that, including fellows from Rigstar came up and talked to me again about possibilities of collaborating. So I think it's definitely something we can look at. The one fellow that came up afterwards, and we had quite an animated discussion about it, and he said, if people get bad service at McDonald's, they don't complain about it because they can just go somewhere else. And I said, yes, and that's fine, but when your connectivity dining options are limited to one or two, and the board has given the indication that we're not even going to cook at home, then we have to rely on the existing service providers. And I think that that's significant, and that's why we have relied in our strategy and what we have achieved on making relationships. And I did give a shout out to City West, and I said, although it has been an up and down relationship, I think that largely any success that we have had to date or will have in the immediate future will probably be a result of that relationship. But it was fascinating. The other thing that, of course, always amazes me is the speed of technological change. And the communications industry is no different in that. And the main thing that they're looking at now is that space is becoming more and more as a low-cost provider of data. The new thing that's moving ahead here is optical transfer between satellites and between base stations, which enables people to not just have gigabyte speeds, but terabyte speeds. So it was a pretty fascinating discussion. I attended 2 sessions on that. One was a pretty deep dive led by one of the folks from the National Research Council who heads that project up in collaboration with the European Space Agency. But they're calling it fiber in the sky at this point.
So that means it's going to be faster.
Well, yeah, no, it's significantly faster. I mean, we give, I think, through down to Director Illich, I think we have, what, a terabyte or gigabyte speed here?
That's correct. We pay, if the board isn't aware, we pay $1,700 for 2 gigs.
Yeah.
And that's a guaranteed speed. So if everyone else in Burns Lake is out, we're still on, us in the hospital. So, but
Yeah.
it's probably worth the $1,700, but it is only 2.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be in the magnitude of 10 in terms of speed. And in terms of dollars per megabyte of data, it is coming down all the time at the point where having a constellation of satellites like we see with Starlink and soon to be I think it's Telstar or Telsat, that's coming down to the point where there's no way it can even, fiber is not going to compete with it. So, go ahead, Director Newell.
So you said optical transmission from satellite to satellite and satellite to base station. Would that be impacted by weather then if it's optical?
Yes. Okay. Yes, that's one of the things that the National Research Council is working on with the European Space Agency and other partners, is that Canada, of course, has, as the one woman said, terrifically bad weather. So at this point, they need a pretty clear line of sight if they're going to go from basically your transmitting station on the ground to the satellite. But they're moving in a lot of different ways in terms of harnessing how they can do that. So now they're looking at having a series of stations across Canada that the signal can be transported by fiber to that specific station that has a clear line of sight with the satellite, then up to that satellite. And if it has to transmit the signal to, say, Nunavut, and there's bad weather there, they will bounce it around off a whole bunch of satellites until they can get it there. And of course, when you're talking about speed of light for data transfer, it takes no time at all, so the latency is really low. They also have what's called high altitude platforms, which is basically a balloon or a plane flying above the weather. They will receive the optical signal and then transfer it by RF down to a station on the ground. But it's phenomenal, yeah. Yep. Dr. Lambert.
Yeah, my question was quite similar to what Director Newell, because we have Starlink, and depending on weather and depending on frost on the dish, depending on whatever it might be, depends on what speed you have. So yeah, I was just gonna say if it's line of sight, then there's gonna be some issues there, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other interesting thing in terms of LEO satellite constellations is the federal and provincial governments have helped to fund a Canadian provider that will have their own constellation to serve Canada. And I think one of the issues, of course, is sovereignty, because when you have anybody who's on Starlink, their data is controlled by a company that is not part of Canada. And that raises all kinds of issues. And as one person said there, theoretically, if Elon Musk wanted to look at our data, he could. And there's no regulations because we can't really regulate an out of Canada provider. Anyway, there will be a full report coming, and I found it fascinating. And I'll say the context that I made when I was down there with some of the other folks again, it was well worth it. So, any other questions? And if not, a motion to go in camera would be in order, and I'll read the motion out. That this meeting be closed to the public pursuant to 92B of the Community Charter for the Board to deal with matters relating to connectivity projects. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Director Newell, seconded by Director Greenaway. All in favor? Motion to adjourn. Dr. Greenaway and Director Lambert. All in favor? We're adjourned. Yep.